Everybody, and welcome back to another dev video. Now we're going to do this one in the three-part format that we've been testing on a few of the videos. So what we're going to end up doing, and this is an idea that got sparked here yesterday, and I know I really shouldn't be making more mods, but I feel like this is a good opportunity to A, produce some machines for testing and conceptual design, and B, kind of help you guys learn how to think about making machines and actually going through the process of making a machine. Now, even though I say this is going to be three parts, the middle part of implementation is probably going to take a while. At least I think, well, I say three parts and I actually haven't planned that out. So anyways, the first part for at least is going to be the design part. So we're going to think through what is it we're going to design. And of course, what it is that is, whoever this is, I actually don't know who it is. I apologize if I don't know it, but considering quite a few actual famous people retweeted him, or rather liked his thing, so I'm feeling like he's done something important at some point in time. I just don't know who he is. But he was talking about this old mod ideal to it makes all coal generators generate coal instead of RF, and I'm like, you know, that's pretty cool. That would be a great prank mod. And then my brain sat there and thought about it for a second. I'm like, you know what, that would be just a cool mod in general. Not the ideal of turning all coal generators into making coal instead of RF, but the ideal of producing fuel from power. One of the big problems that I've seen in playing Minecraft, and it's not just Minecraft, it's about any game, is that power is an issue. You usually have to build big generators on site, and you have to feed those generators with like a lot of fuel to make them run. Most people end up building big reactors and just running their base off big reactors, and they build huge battery banks and they store up the power, and they just go that way. The way I personally like to play is I like to use fuel generators. So I like to use things like steam generators, where you feed a boiler a fuel block of some kind, like coal, charcoal, wood, whatever. I usually actually end up using wood half the time. And this will produce steam, and of course it'll produce power for your base. I like to run the steam pipes all around the base and then run power that way. The issue with this is that you have to produce fuel for it, and it can be a little tricky. The number one way I end up doing it is I end up building either a forestry farm or a what's the other mod? I completely forgot what it is. It's the other mod that has farming machines in it, but they're really basic, and it just completely went over my head. But you build a planter block, then you have a harvester block, and that's it. You don't have to do much work with them, and you can build them up to oh yeah, it's Mine Factory Reloaded. That's what it is. So I ended up using actually Mine Factory Reloaded more than I use Forestry. Forestry used to be a really cool mod back in like the 1.6 and kind of days, and then they redid the entire mod and made it more complicated. Now it's not more complicated in a bad way, it's just more complicated, period. The mod's completely different. It's kind of what ended up happening when I took ICBM Classic and turned it into the new ICBM. It's the same idea. You took a simple mod and turned it into a complex mod. And not probably for the better, but it did make the mod fresh again, which I do admit worked out for it. I actually do enjoy playing the new Forestry occasionally. It's just I missed the old one where you placed on a machine and then you put items in it and you were done. You didn't have to do any more work. But regardless, I'm getting off subject. So I end up using those to build wood, and I take the wood, I end up either using it directly into the boiler, or I turn it into charcoal first via steam furnace. And by the way, one thing about steam machines, Railcraft is the one I end up using half the time. Although I used to have my own steam mod before Railcraft added theirs, and then I stopped updating it because Railcraft did the same thing, just wasn't as pretty animation-wise. For those who don't remember what that is, just look up on the YouTube list and you'll find a mod at the very beginning of my YouTube history of when I started making videos of a steam piston design, an actual physical 3D model that rotated and animated and produced rotational energy. It looked really cool. I built that back in like 1.2.5 Minecraft. But yeah, so producing different fuel to power the machines, and this can get kind of tedious and can be difficult, especially when I need to ship fuel via train all the way to my front line or one of my hidden bases or a factory to power that factory, because I end up having to either do two things. A, produce tons of trees on a single site, like a farm site or something, stock them up, turn them into fuel, and then pump them via train network everywhere. Or I build a localized tree farm and then just basically build a replica of my power system, which the second one's in what I do half the time, because that allows me to chunk unload the area without having to worry about having huge train networks going everywhere. But once again, this is difficult because you have to have huge logistics supply networks or big setups. An alternative to this is to use things like solar power, wind power, start using more fuel density fuels like liquid fuels, lava, stuff like that. And this is where this thought comes into. So when you're using solar power, one of the biggest issues is storing the power, because you only have sunlight for 70 minutes during the day. And usually when I'm playing Minecraft, I run with mods that make the day last hours. That way I get more sunlight to explore, because I don't like exploring during the night. Not that I'm afraid of the night, it's just I can't see in the dark. And night vision potions are a pain in the butt to make. So with renewable energy sources, you have to store the power. This means a lot of battery banks, which means a lot of cost. One of the better ways to handle it is to take that solar energy, use it to create something else that then is used to be turned into actual power. And this is where the concept of this mod I'm thinking of comes into, where you can take power and turn it into fuel. That way your fuel blocks are your power storage. Another alternative to this, of course, would be to pump water uphill, but Minecraft doesn't have the physics-based system to do that, even though that's something I'm actually working on in real life, is to make a generator that runs off of gravitational energy via water, which is really cool. So anyways, this all excited of explaining where the concept is. Here's the plan, and we're going to sketch this out on something a little nicer than Notepad. But we're going to start off by making a generator that takes air and power and turns it into a fuel block. This comes from Factorio. One of either the base game or one of the mods has the ability to take nitrogen and a few other elements from which basically you get from air, and combine it with power, because you don't do anything else with it. You just provide power. Factorio is amazing on its simplicity, yet it's having enough complexity in it to balance out. And you end up with a fuel block. Then you can turn around and take a fuel block and you just put it in a furnace and you make steam energy and everything else. So that's what we're going to do. This is going to be a first phase. Second phase, we're going to make this mod more usable. Having just this, nobody's going to use the mod. It'll pretty much be a mod that only I will use, and maybe like a handful of other people will download and use as well. So the next step is to make a way that you can take power and produce any of the basic items. So like iron ores, gold ore, stuff like that. Saplings, trees, plants, various mob drops probably. This will be essentially a synthesification machine, and we'll probably still use air in the process. I mean, you get examples, power to plants, etc. So we'll do that as phase 2. We'll do some cool rendering as well, so like as it's constructing things, it'll render in a cool animation, so you actually see the item being constructed. This will change per machine, even though I have it basically... I guess I can't spell Star Trek. I did this at like 3 in the morning. But, so one of the ideals is to use a Star Trek style beam animation, where you have like a blue beam, pretty much look like it's a pixel by pixel assembling the item. And this is an animation that wouldn't be too hard to do, because you just take the UV map and you slowly expand the UV and the mesh size of the item you're rendering, so that way it looks like it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, when the reality is you're just moving the UV by a pixel at a time. Of course, it won't work on 3D blocks, but we're going to do JSON handling anyway, so all these are going to be JSON handled recipes and renders. So if you want to come in with your own items and make them like really pretty on the rendering, you can, etc. They'll also have JSON recipes, etc. Power, time. One of the ways to balance this is it's going to be time dependent. So even though you can produce items for free, basically, it's going to be really slow. We might come in with an upgrade system or whatever later. I don't know. It's a really basic design so far. Phase 3, make every item in the game. This one's going to be a little bit different than phase 2, so this one is not going to be JSON based. This one's going to try to guess at what the item value is. It's going to be really similar to equivalent exchanges system, at least conceptually wise. I actually don't know how equivalent exchange works in the fundamental level. I've only bug fixed the mod a few times in the past, and I've never actually solidly played the newer versions. I did play one of the original versions of equivalent exchange like way back, and I don't even know if it was called equivalent exchange then, but that was back when you only had a philosopher's stone and you just combined the philosopher's stone with different items to make different items, and you pretty much could go into the nether and mine lava and turn that into everything in the game, which was really cool. But this will be somewhat similar. You'll be able to produce any item via power. It'll be an incredibly slow rate, because effectively what it will do is it'll produce the raw resources, then take the raw resources and turn them into different items. So if you want to make an ingot and you want to turn the ingot into, say, an iron rod, it's going to have to dematerialize the ingot and then rematerialize the ingot as a rod. And it'll do that in the most efficient way possible, so you end up probably with 2 rods instead of 1. And then that'll go into a box, and then it'll try to make all the other parts, and it'll try to combine them. So what you're essentially building with the Phase 3 thing is a molecular assembler that's going to slowly build the item for you, and you're going to end up with any, like, bonus resources in the process. So this will probably have waste materials. Not entirely sure how we're going to end up coding this, but we're going to focus on Phase 1 today, because that's the easiest phase we can do. And as we hit each new phase, I'll do a new design video for them. And to be honest, we'll probably pop rendering up here in Phase 1. I don't know. This will be hit or miss how this goes. This is just a conceptual ideal of what I want to do in each phase. How it actually gets implemented is a different story. We decide whatever. Anyways, let's go get ahead and open up ourselves Google Drive and start the actual design phase. And that way we know what we're going to do. I mean, this is not going to be too hard. So this is actually going to be a production mod because I'm just going to build it probably today and I'm going to release it today. So, and yeah, we'll just make a new folder. Power, 2 items. This is not going to be a single block mod. This will be a voltage mod. The reason for that is I don't want to have to remake everything. If we're doing JSON recipes, Voltage has all the JSON stuff in it. If we're doing machines, it's best to do all of that via Voltage because it's already have all the prefabs built out. You know, we don't actually need a design. We need a Google Drive, Google Drawing. We're just going to make a single Google Drawing for this because, well, we don't really need much. So the graphics for this, by the way, are it's going to be as basic as you can get. We're going to have a box. That box is then going to have a wire attached to it. Dark gray. And we'll change this to like a light gray. So I have a box that has a wire on it. We'll say the shape is going to be... I kind of don't know if I want to make this 3D or not. We'll start off with the first version. We'll just do like animation face on it. Basically almost the same color as that. And what you'll do is you'll have like a piece of coal animate in the middle of it. And that'll just be created and it'll just like power come in from the side. So we'll have like a little blue beam come in from the side and we'll just copy and paste this a couple times. Make sure it's like symmetrical in its animation. That way, depending on what direction you put the wire on it, it looks all the same. So, oh, you know what? We may actually be able to make it different based on how you build it. That's a thought I didn't think about. Is we can make it so that way the more wires you put on this, the faster it builds the item. We'll revisit that concept later because that concept I have in mind would depend on the voltage and ampage of the wires. So like how much power is physically coming in on each side. And we want this to work with RF, so that means we're literally only going to get like some RF value. So to literally be like RF something. And then it will produce... Let's go ahead and put a hopper on the bottom of this. And a different color. There we go. And a different color, good. Yeah, that's better. That looks closer to a hopper. So this will produce cool items, of course. I'm having a little bit of fun with the drawings. I mean, I'm somewhat trying to waste time because I gotta go somewhere after that I'm done with the design. So by the time I get the design done, then I gotta head out. And then this is gonna be just some kind of yellow. There we go. So that will produce cool items. So we'll get a cool item out of it. Cool item at time. So we'll have to figure out how much time we need to produce for the cool items. It's balanced. And that's the visual aspect of it. Now the design aspect of it, we're going to need a node class, which will be our machine node. So this will be tile power to cool is what we'll call this. This will of course need to keep track of its own power, an inventory, and then a processing time or processing progress. Because the reason we'll do progress is that you could actually, if you're not putting enough power into it, it'll just take longer to bake. So then that means we're going to need a recipe system, because we'll probably, even though this is going to be called power to coal, it'll be some kind of recipe. So recipe is going to need to track how much power it's going to take, and then we'll have a minimum time. Actually, power cost and power per tick, and then result, and then we'll also have an input. So like if we do this recipe, we might as well go ahead and finish it for a start, and this would be an array of inputs. So what you could do is, if you wanted to make an item, and this would be back to the original design down, this would be pretty much phase 2 and phase 3. If you want to make an item, instead of going straight from power to the item, you can take a catalyst item. So like I could put a stick in there, and then that would cut the cost of power down, and would improve the amount of time it takes, and of course make it easier to do. So we'll have a recipe. This is of course going to be some kind of recipe handler. By the way, I'm doing basically a mix between a domain model and a class diagram for those who are not familiar with what this is. So we have recipe manager. I actually have a system already built for this, so we don't have to do anything. This will literally just be a list of recipes. No, this wouldn't be a list of recipes. This would be item stack to recipe. The reason we'll do an item stack is you'll physically select what you want to craft. It'll be a later thing though. And put this down here. Make sure that's a little bigger so it matches. And make sure we do some arrows here. And add some extra text. So I'm gonna add some extra text here. I will explain one of these days like what this stuff really is. It's essentially like when you do a domain model, you actually describe what the relationship is between the components. That way you can keep track of what the hell you're doing. So we'll have that. Pretty much a power thing, and we're going to need a block JSON. And I'm not even gonna, well actually hold on, let's actually make these boxes. I was about to say I'm not gonna make these boxes, but they would look nicer as boxes. So you'd have a block JSON. We don't need an item JSON because that's already handled by the block. We do need a render JSON. And that's, I think, all we need for the actual block itself. There's not a lot else to go with this. And then what we do is we come down here and we just put this down here. We're going to need a processor. I could copy and paste today. And then we'll need some recipes. So that's every component we are literally going to need for this in order to get this done, because the node class itself is going to be registered by the block, and then it's going to be rendered by the render JSON. So no matter what we do with render states, so this visual over here, it's handled by this. So this is going to be this thing. And then this guy is going to handle this thing. This guy is going to handle that guy. And this guy is going to turn into that thing, which is then going to actually make these guys. So actually let's drag this down so it's a little easier to understand what's going on and it doesn't look as crap. So that kind of gives us a picture of what's going on. And then of course you have processors that are going to load both of these guys. So these guys are actually loaded by a JSON loading system. And that's our domain model, at least. Gives us all of our components. And what we'll do is come back in the next video and actually start implementing this. The first thing we'll hit out is getting the tile done. Then we won't even worry about the recipes right away. So what we'll do with the very first version, we'll go, okay, you just produce coal. And we'll just get that done. So we'll go, okay, if you have an inventory slot and we get this much power and everything else, we'll do that. Then once we get all that done, we'll do the render. get all the render state set up. So there will be a render state system. So this one will actually have a render state. This is not the same render states as are in the newer 1.8 plus version. This is 1.7. This is a custom system implemented for the JSON system, but it works exactly the same way. So you just go, okay, my render state is item progress 1 of 100. And then that will go to here and it'll go, hey, do you have a 1 out of 100 render progress state? And it'll go, yes, I do. What this will end up turning into, by the way, though, is there will be a setting in here, or it'll be in one of these. It'll be in the recipe, actually. So actually the recipe will have render steps is what it'll have. That way this thing understands what render step it is. So it'll be render step. So you'll have an empty, a completed, and then you'll have any number between those two in order to make this guy to render as if he's being constructed slowly. So when you visually look at the machine, you can see the progress. And that is actually it. So we're done with the design. It's not too complicated. If you guys have questions, go ahead and put them in the comment section. If you like this format, you can put comments as well. If you want to see more of this, subscribe button is always there. There's also the notification little bell button you can click. I don't care if you guys hit them, but we'll get more of these videos out and etc.